Dum de dum de dum. G'day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Barney here, and I've got my extra good mate, as you can see from across the Tasman, Bill Daly. Welcome, Bill.
Hello, Barney.
No worries. Good to see you, bud. Good to see you. I had the pleasure of Bill's company about 6 weeks ago. He was across in our place, and I noticed that they breed them tall in New Zealand. They breed them
Yeah,
pretty
sure.
tall.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just a little fella, and sort of my ears go down at that, but no, they don't. But yeah, Bill's a tall bloke, and he's a lovely storyteller and a lovely man, and he's always got plenty of things to talk about. And I guess the to me the beauty of what we're on about is we're on about happiness, we're on about health, we're on about family, we're on about community, and they're all important things to us. They're sort of just right up there, aren't they? You know, important community and family. I know my mum's celebrating her 85th birthday. And so this is coming up just after Christmas this year, and we reckon that's just tops. You know, that's beautiful that we've had her for so long. And she's a beaut mum, and she's a good woman. She was a loyal wife to her husband, and he used to terrorise her just nicely. It was all good fun and entertaining, which is what can happen in families, can't it? Eh? All this terrorising, it's all good. But yeah, this is the way it is. It's just to me, it's just lovely. Families to us. In my home, families are everything, and I think that's just beaut. Anyway, Bill, it's lovely to see you, and I'll give you the floor to have a bit of a yarn if you've got a yarn to tell.
Well, as you know, I've known your mum for since the early 1980s,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
it was lovely recently in Adelaide to meet up with her.
Hmm.
And I've still got some notes here of some things she told me I should be reading, and told me a little bit about the books that were interesting her at the time, which
Hmm.
was very interesting.
Hmm.
And over the last dozen or so years, I've read some of the articles that your mum has written, and uh, there is something about getting older that we think a little differently.
Hmm.
Um, and I could see coming out in your mum's writing when she was editing the magazine that some really deep stuff there, some deep concepts,
Mm.
and and that was really good. I think that's one of the things that older people offer to the younger generations,
Mm.
middle-aged generations and younger, is that they're passing on a little bit of wisdom, and they're also learning at the same time themselves. We never stop learning.
No, that's right. I
Mm,
I I must admit that what I thought, I'm early 60s sort of thing that I admit to, and I must admit when I was like early 20s, okay, you're only a pup at early 20s, but the thing is, I thought in a certain fashion, and I thought things, and I thought about people, and I thought about family, and the things that were of value then. And I tell you what, it's completely changed. And when I was early 40s, I remember coming across. Try this one, Bill. I remember
yeah.
coming across a young kid who was 22 years old, and he just walked in the door of where I worked, and I'd been in that place for 22 years. And I was 22 when he walked in. So try that one, eh? And I said, you, pointed my finger at him, you. I said, you were born when I started work here. You were just born. And look at you now. You're more than 6 foot tall, and you're 22 years old, and you're starting work here. And I just thought, isn't that just wonderful? It was such a different thing because here it was just this tiny little baby, and here he was all grown up, and starting work alongside of me. And that's how quick life went by. It's just that's nearly 20 years ago that I saw that young man, and no doubt may have had his own children by then, and watching them grow up. So it goes so quick. Yeah.
it, it certainly can. One of the first jobs I had was in what we in New Zealand call a freezing works, abattoirs in some countries, slaughterhouses,
Okay. Yep. Yep. Yep.
and
That's
sheep.
I'm not sure about slaughterhouses. Hang on a sec. Not sure about slaughterhouses.
Ah, we,
Bill, come
I know. I don't think they do that in Australia.
Oh, not sure about slaughterhouses. Okay, go on.
And I had pretty much two choices when it came to lunchtime because there was a bunch of other young fellas there,
Hmm.
and that was to play poker with some of the other young blokes and lose a bit of money,
Mhm.
although I don't think there was much money involved in it.
Mhm.
Or I could talk to some of the older chaps, and I got into the habit of talking to 3 or 4 of the older chaps on a regular basis
Mhm.
at smoko lunchtime,
Mhm.
and they'd all been veterans of the Second World War, and it was fascinating listening to stories they told about their lives, odd little bits and pieces about their war experience in the
Mhm.
Middle East and in
Mhm.
Europe.
Mhm.
Um, and lots of former soldiers did not talk about much of those things. So there was no intimate details, but there was little bits and pieces. And funny enough, I've never had a chance to follow this up, but I have mentioned it to some other people, and they've said yes, that's correct, or a number of people have said to me. And I believe much of our history is deliberately distorted
Mhm.
or hidden
Mhm.
or deliberately suppressed, yes. But I can recall one of the chaps telling me he was in the Middle East with the New Zealand, and the Aussie forces would have been there too.
Mhm.
And we had Maoris amongst we had a Maori battalion actually, but there were Maoris amongst our soldiers.
Mhm.
And the Maoris picked up the local language very much more easily than the Europeans.
Mhm.
And I thought this was very interesting. And then one of the chaps said to me, one of the Maoris said to him, "Oh, well, some of their words are the same as ours."
Okay.
Um, and this is particularly interesting. And I remember years ago mentioning this to somebody. I was much older by then, and they said, "Well, that's interesting. I was in Spain, and I bumped into some other New Zealanders there, including a couple of Maori, and one of them said some of the words they use here are the same as ours." And this kind of indicated that whatever voyaging had been done by different peoples in the past,
Yep.
certain
Yep.
words had travelled around from the Middle East, from the Mediterranean area, perhaps North Africa,
Mhm.
down through the Pacific to native people in New Zealand.
Mhm.
Um, Quite a few decades ago, I think it was in the 1960s, a chap called Thor Thor
Mhm.
Herdale,
Mhm.
he was convinced that at least some of the Maori, if not all of them, but some of them, had come from South America. And it was he assumed or suggested that they'd probably come on a reed boat, and he himself undertook a voyage,
Yeah.
which is a fascinating story in itself, to see if a reed boat could go from South America across to New Zealand. And I think he got most of the way, and it sunk. There must have been support vessels there. And again, I haven't looked deeply into that story. It's often rubbished by people who the more PC type people, because it doesn't quite
I'm just
fit.
I'm just going to shift us around here a bit, Bill, so the people can see the map here. Now,
Okay.
okay,
All right.
on the map you can see over there, and I'll just see if I can get my
Yeah.
hand right. Let's have a look. So let's have a look. Is it over there? It is over there.
Yeah. Yeah. Over there.
Over there. Over there somewhere. Over there. That's it.
That way.
Yeah,
No, no, that way.
that's right. Over there is South America, and right here where my finger is at the moment, that same finger that's pointing over there,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's where New Zealand is. Now that's a lot of water to travel, isn't it?
That's a lot of water. It's a
Look
long
at
way.
that.
It's a long way even to fly,
That's a
and
lot of water to travel. By jingoes,
it's a
yep.
it's a lot further going that way from New Zealand to South America than it is across to Australia. So
Yeah,
that would
certainly
be
is.
going to the east.
Yeah,
And yes, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of water. I
that's a
understand
lot.
that the jet aircraft, passenger planes these days,
Mhm,
they used to only use, up until fairly recent times, they only used four-engine jets for that trip, because if you lose an engine, well, you've still got three of them.
mhm,
But with the increased reliability of some of the newer aircraft, they
mhm,
are doing trips on with two-engined
mhm,
aircraft. But it's
mhm.
a long way across water,
It certainly is.
and
Nowhere to land. Yeah, nowhere to land.
um,
Yeah.
I think Easter Island is regarded as as an airport for emergency purposes, but the rules I think now are that an airplane is allowed to be quite a few hours away from an airfield
Mhm,
if it loses an engine, which means you're a long way across that water for a long time on one engine if that
It certainly
happens.
is. I mean, those
Yeah.
planes are travelling at 900 k's an hour. So if
Mm.
they're at full flight, so many hours away, it's you can be several thousand kilometres away, can't you?
Probably not. Yeah, whether it's 2, 3 hours, something like that. But
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
that's a fair way. That's
That's a lot
yeah,
of
yeah, probably
yeah.
over 2,000 kilometers. Yeah.
Mm, mm.
In aviation, of course, is talked in nautical miles,
That's
and
right.
and
Yes, because I
yeah.
understand you're a pilot. An amateur pilot, Bill. Or
Oh well, yeah,
are you
very
commercial?
amateur,
Very
very
am.
amateur, very amateur.
We're all that. We're all that. Good.
Kilometers are used in passenger planes to also miles or nautical miles, but
Mhm.
nautical
Mm.
miles is longer than an ordinary mile
Mhm.
and goes back to the early sailing ship days.
Mhm.
May go back even before that. It was used by the sailing ships,
Mm.
and the term knot, a ship is sailing at 4 knots an hour or 10 knots an hour,
Mhm. Mm.
was a knot on a rope.
Mhm.
So, and then that would be trailed out into the sea, and it must have been a long rope. If we could work out that the ship was sailing at 4 knots per hour or whatever it was, but
Mm.
probably
Mm.
they measured in quarter miles or something. But that was a nautical mile,
Yeah. Yeah.
and commercially aircraft and whether commercial or not, still work in nautical miles.
Mhm.
Aviation maps use nautical miles.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's all fascinating stuff, I guess, because there's this whole history of what we don't understand, and especially the I mean, I am led to believe in the pyramids, which are 5,000 years old, they found honey, and I thought, okay, that's pretty fantastic. There's honey, and they knew it was honey, 5,000 years old, but also they found opals, and the opals were from Lightning Ridge. Now try that one. Lightning Ridge is in Australia, right? Lightning Ridge.
And
I think it's in New South Wales, and the opal is unique to that area. So the colours are unique. Now, okay, it could have been discovered by one group of people, and they moved a certain distance and handed it to someone else, and handed it to someone else, and in the end, it got to the pyramids, to Egypt. But the fact is that it's gone this whole distance, and I mean, I'm going to just do a little bit of a walk out of the screen here because if you have a look at the map behind us, and you see, well, okay, to the northwest of Australia, there's the Indonesian archipelago, and through those Asian areas across past India, and then I'm going to go off the screen here because you're looking at travelling all the way through to northern Africa. And that's where it's gone. And that's absolutely huge. And that was the distance they travelled 5,000 years ago. So I think all of that's fascinating because it brings us to the point where we actually got to ask the question. The New Zealanders are there as Maoris, and maybe Polynesian, maybe Melanesian, I don't know. But we've got the Fuzzy Wuzzies in Papua New Guinea, and as I understand it, there were Fuzzy Wuzzies in Tasmania as well. And there's all these different peoples that have migrated around the world, and we don't really understand the history. We get this sort of sanitized thing from the Politburo, and they say, well, this is your history that we're going to give to you now, but it's not necessarily based on what's out there, what's obvious, what you can actually look at and think about. And I find that fascinating when you talk about the language that the Maoris had, and they understood words from South America, and you consider that, especially the land that's there and directionally towards the western side of Europe where Spain is, and then of course you keep going that way, and it gets you in the end from Britain across to Greenland, and that it gets you to the essentially um, the east coast of the Americas. So it's a long way round, but it's possible, that the reed boat and other devices can get you a certain distance. Whether it actually crossed the Pacific, it might seem to me it's just wow. If planes can't do it today, not willingly, how's a reed boat going to do it? Navigate from the east of New Zealand to the west of the Americas. It's huge, isn't it? You know, whereas if we look
Mm.
at the stepping stones of the Indonesian archipelago and through Asia, Asia Minor, and then Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and then across that northern Atlantic area there, you can see it. You can see it physically possible that the migration could happen that way. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we don't have a clear answer on. I find it all fascinating.
It's absolutely fascinating, and I understand down the east coast of Australia,
Mm.
there's some evidence of at different times some type of different types of mining for minerals or
Mm. I've heard that
um,
before. That's right.
um,
Yeah, ruins of old walls and things like that. Yeah.
yeah, we have some ruins of old walls in New Zealand,
Mm.
and it's contemporary thinking by the experts
Mm.
is that this means nothing. It's just perhaps some mistakes in the past.
Mm.
But to me, that's actually dishonest. It's appallingly dishonest because
Mm.
there isn't actually a search for truth. It's not like, wow, this is interesting. Let's have a look at this.
Mm.
It's that we've chosen a particular version of history, and that
Mm-hmm.
version of history is ABC or whatever,
Mm. Mm.
and we're going to stick with that. We're not interested in facts. We're
Mm.
not interested in checking something out that may or may not be correct.
Mm.
We're not going to promote anything that disturbs that ABC
Mm. Mm.
version. So, of course, this is part of a bigger picture,
Mm.
as we all know, or many of us know, and that is that there is an attack. There's a deliberate attack to deny the Europeans um, contact with their own heritage,
Mm.
and via television and other mechanisms, there's been a tremendous attack. I'd say the
Mm.
schooling system in particular,
Mm.
a tremendous attack to the point where the Europeans aren't regarded as having any culture.
Mm.
Only other people have culture.
Mm.
But in
Yeah.
actual fact, it's really a European term. I'm not saying other people haven't got much to offer and some wonderful history, but the
Mm-hmm.
Europeans have an incredible history.
That's right. Yep.
And whether it's literature, architecture, music, the social structures, um, building methods,
Mm.
farming methods,
Mm-hmm.
the development of tools.
Mm.
Um, there's a tremendous heritage there, and these things don't just come out of thin air.
No.
Some
No.
some social structure is required, and it has to be a social structure that enables that type of development.
Mm.
And
Mm.
um, it's there's so much there and it interests me. It concerns me that when Iraq was smashed up a few years ago,
Yeah.
one of the first things they did was they went in and destroyed so much of um, well,
Museums.
the museums were raped,
Mm.
and archaeological finds that had been discovered in the last 200 or 300 years, couple
Yeah.
hundred years anyway,
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
German, British, French archaeologists in the main.
Yeah.
Um, they were routed. They were smashed to pieces in some
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's all to me. It's all pretty sad. It's all pretty sad, and it's all almost stopping us from celebrating our Western European heritage. And that to me is the joy of what the joy of what we're about here.
mm,
Is that Australia was colonised, and it was colonised by Britain, and with Britain came their laws, came our constitution, in a sense that the seeds of our constitution were laid in Britain, and they evolved and flowered and blossomed in Australia, New Zealand, and our common law, our trial by jury, habeas corpus. You know, you can't just be imprisoned and not even presented for trial. You've got to be presented to a judge. And these are all like Inquisition stuff or Star Chambers and all that sort of stuff. These are the things that our history, our culture rejects. And it holds on to the tradition of common law, the tradition of trial by jury. You know, you can't be determined guilt by the commissar. You've got to be actually assessed by your own peers, your own equals, and they've got to look at probability and all these things. And that's our rich culture and our rich history. And yeah, it's being hidden from us. But I say to you folks, let's celebrate it. Let's celebrate our Western. Christian history, our culture, our heritage. That's part of Australia. It's part of New Zealand, and I can't think of anything better to finish on that note, Bill. I think you've led us into a flower of opportunity, an opportunity to celebrate as we're heading in towards Christmas. So I just want to thank you, Bill. I think you've done a beaut job, and I enjoyed doing this forum with you today.
Hmm. I have been thinking of practicing doing my bars, but and do some real sheep talk. And
Well, I've been practicing that with the other puppet Betty, but it's I break into laughter every time I think about it. Good on you, good on you. Thanks, ladies and
oh,
gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. All right, take care. We'll catch you next time. See you.
good on you, Barney.
Good on you, Bill.